Hello and welcome to our session for today. We have a brand new in-depth education and hello, welcome. Welcome to our in-depth education for today. We have a brand new topic for you and I know you're going to love this. It is a topic on no more hiding and freedom from shame. And so if this is something of interest and you love the resource that we have for you, then just in the comments below, you can type in hide and we will get this to you today. If you're watching the replay, hit replay. If you're watching live, say hi. So welcome to the session for today. We're going to cover the shame matrix. So I've deeply been thinking about this and also pride. So keep an eye out for next week because we're going to be covering pride. But today it is about shame. And the session today, I'm going to cover what the matrix the shame matrix is and how they interact. And so it gives you a deeper concept of when someone comes to you with a challenge and you think, okay, this is definitely shame related. It'll give you a new map that you can think about this particular challenge that people have or this experience that people have. So first of all, let's define what shame is. And it's this feeling about your entire self. So it's not like guilt, where guilt is something that you've done in your motor function, that you've done something that's caused someone that you feel guilty about. And so shame is about that involving of your entire self, where you self-scrutinize and you judge yourself. And so there becomes an experience that you have this negative, in perception, negative self-talk, which is like, I'm a terrible person, I'm not good enough. And so this language or these phrases that you have are indications that there is something that you're perceiving about yourself that you feel shameful about. And so when we feel shame, it shows up in different ways. So sometimes for some people can blush if they feel shameful about something. They can also avert their gaze and not look at you. And they could also change in maybe their posture as a result of shame. And so when we want to understand shame, why it's so important, and also pride as well, which we're going to go into next week, is that essentially how we're molded as human beings, especially when you're a child, forms our identity because we're being molded in terms of what we have pride around, because we want to do that more. And then what we have shame around, we want to hide or not do. And so our maybe personality or our identity can be very much molded by the influences that we have on a cultural level, a societal level, a family level, about what is okay and what is maybe creates shame and what creates pride within ourselves. And so what we want to be able to do is unpack this dynamic for us so that we can maybe dissolve any society norms that we have, cultural norms that we have, so we can just be free to be ourselves and not hang on to this shame dynamic. And so when we look at shame, there are different things that can happen for different people and what it actually does in their life. So let me just go through some of them, and you may have experienced it or noticed this is it with some of your clients that you work with. And so there can be this experience of feeling flawed and that there's something wrong with you, that it can lead to social withdrawal because you don't want to be around people. It can lead to addictions for some people because of the dynamic of feeling shameful, that's trying to hide something or make themselves feel a particular way. It can make you maybe more difficult to trust people because there's that element of retreating, maybe feeling empty and lonely or feeling isolated and on your own. It may be for some people they go into people pleasing, very much so, because it's like they want to cover up their feeling that they have about themselves, and so they go into extra people pleasing to make themselves feel better. And so there's lots of different ways that shame will show up and present in someone's life. And so it gets you to start to think about the underlying, what's really driving what we often talk about in Maximum Growth Academy and all the classes that we do, is like the problem underneath the problem, what's really going on. And so let me show you the beginning of this shame matrix with you. So in a lot of the diagrams that we have inside of Maximum Growth Academy, this is how we work, and we have self at the top and other, because we are either driven by ourselves, or we're driven by the outside world. We also have an inward focus where we go inward and retreat inside, and then we also have an outward way that we experience the world as well. And so when we're looking at these different dynamics, that we have defense mechanisms, let's call them that, that we have to help us regulate our emotions. And as shame gets triggered up inside of us, we then think about, well, it can be an unconscious strategy. It's like, what's the safest way to go about working through or resolving shame or handling shame? And so what we want to be able to do is recognize these patterns of behaviors that we have, so then we can have greater awareness, and then make more conscious decisions to shift or know what we need to do to address, to look at the underlying cause. And so we have this dynamic here. So let me go through. So we can be, when it comes to shame, we can either be orientated based on direction. And so what I mean by that is our direction of our shame is either focusing inward or it's focusing outward. And we can also have, is the target, we can also describe it this way, is the target on self? Are we focusing that direction towards self, or are we focusing the direction towards others? So let's start with the first one, which is withdrawal. This is where you go inward, and you're withdrawing from the outside world. And so then you're retreating when you go through shame, something that you perceive shameful, is you retreat from social interaction and avoid further, to essentially avoid anything happening that will trigger the shame even more. And so an example could this be is, let's say that you are going through experience where you have cheated on an exam. And so then you've been shamed for that experience. And so then you retreat backwards, you retreat inwards instead of going outward to people and speaking, you go inward and become more quiet and withdraw. So people withdraw inward and escape because they perceive a painful experience on the outside, and their safest way and strategy is to go inward and then social isolate, running and hiding from the group. And so we go through this experience. And that's because the outside world, there's a perception of negative emotion and negative experience, and that's associated with what it is. And it's safer to be inward and engage in the inward world than it is in the outside world. Essentially, we'd call that like self-preservation. But there's a lot of inward turmoil that happens as you withdraw from the outside world. And so as you go and try to seek solitude, our internal world can be quite turbulent and quite reactive. And so even though there's an avoidance of people on the outside, you can't avoid you. So there's avoidance of the exposure to the outside world when you withdraw. And so that means that you don't want to put yourself in more positions where you feel that your flaws or whatever the action you did is going to create more shame within you. So it's safer or wiser to be inward. And so withdrawal also has its upside too, because sometimes we can do our internal processing and we can do it quietly and resolve it and then go back out to the world. So there's not only a negative side to it, there's also an upward side to it as well. Okay, so then the next aspect of the shame matrix is the attack of self. So instead of just going inward, there might be a withdrawal, but there's also an attack of self. So this is where you turn the shame inwards and then become self-critical, defensive, and self-attacking, put yourself down. Why can't I do anything right? What's wrong with me? I'm never gonna fail or never gonna mount to anything. And this self-attacking happens internally. And so that can be because you're afraid of being abandoned, because if shame comes up, sometimes that is withdrawal from the group, and then you perceive I'm going to be abandoned, and so you don't want to say anything outwardly to anyone. So it's the self-attack inward, because the fear of abandonment, if it went outward, means that people would leave. So you inwardly put that shame inside so that then people stay, but internally it's a fight and a battle. And so instead of, and that can also help maybe like exacerbate the internal shame that you also feel towards yourself, because you've felt shame for something that's happened, and then you beat yourself down and you go into self-attacking, and then you experience more shame. And so then there's this like shame cycle that you just can't, it's struggle to get out of. And so high self-criticism, maybe you have self-destructive behavior that can happen here. This can be like maybe emotional eating. It can be different ways that people might go about kind of covering it, maybe drinking or getting obsessive on certain things, like self-attacking. And so it's this internalized strategy to work through the shame, but it's self-attacking. And so people sometimes maybe go through sabotaging in what they perceive success as a way, because they feel the shame, they go into self-attack inside, they sabotage, which creates more maybe withdrawal and maybe more self-attacking. So this is another aspect, which is an inward directed towards self, and then the withdrawal is inward, and it's, even though, because remember, inactions are still directed towards self, but it's an inaction but directed towards others. Okay, so the next aspect that we're going to look at in the shame matrix is the avoidant strategy. And so avoidant is where you are moving away and not wanting to be near someone else. So it's like you're not necessarily retreating and hiding away, as in you're not exposing yourself to someone else. It is really that you are avoiding engaging. So you could still be in the room, but I'm going to avoid that particular individual because I don't want to talk to them, and you don't want to confront a situation. So the shame, it's the feeling with shame, but without directly confronting it. So you're still outward to the world, but it's like not wanting to face that. And so the feeling in shame is interesting in avoidance. So this can be where maybe more drinking happens, like more alcohol, drugs, the addictions come up with this side of the shame matrix, is because if we feel shame about something, we have to then go into its counter opposite, which is what's going to give us an elation high, maybe some pride. And so then you feel good, and that substitutes, or it kind of band-aids the feeling of shame. And so that excessive kind of excitement or high that you get like counterbalance or covers it up. And so the again, it's directed towards self though, because it's an avoidance of what you want to focus on, and it's still avoidance of self. And so this does show up in somewhat of a lack of participation. Don't want to go out and participate in the world. Shame, that's how shame shows up. We also can be emotionally distant towards someone, because the emotional distance, because there's disengagement there, it means that you're not having to show up and have maybe deeper conversations, and so you're more aloof in a situation. But that can be a cover up for shame. So we want to start to think about this when we have a client, or when we're thinking about our own dynamic. It's like, why am I so aloof in this moment? It's like, okay, maybe that's because I have some shame, I'm trying to avoid something, so acting aloof is actually my mechanism and coping mechanism to not have to resolve or look at that particular dynamic. So something to ponder and think about. And our last part that we're going to cover in our shame matrix, hope you're finding this interesting. If you're loving it, then do share in the comments below. If you are watching the replay, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the last aspect we're going to look at in the shame matrix, which is attacking others. Now, you may have been on the other end of this, or you may have been the one that have done this, but this is where you direct your shame towards someone else, blame someone else, criticize someone else in a cover up to how you feel. I see this sometimes where you might have someone who wants to criticize someone else and tell everyone else what they've been doing wrong, or how they're doing things not in the proper way, whatever the dynamic is. But that can cover up the shame that they're feeling about their maybe career or life or whatever it is, and then the criticism that comes in to make them feel better, because you put someone else down, you're lifting yourself up, you feel better. And so the perception on the surface feels like shame is being dissolved or not, or it's not as loud. However, there can be later shame ramifications with the outward attacking of others, because then society brings you back into balance. You shouldn't be doing that, shouldn't be saying that, or your internal conscious mind says that to you. And so it's helping you and maybe creating more shame because of what you've been saying or how you've been behaving. And so there can be also, with attacking others, there can be a deflection. So not really going in and fully working on their own stuff and what's going on for them, but it's deflecting the fault, or the charge is what someone else is doing, and their shortcomings rather than your own. There can be an element somewhat of regaining, let's say, control, because what happens is when we attack others and there's an attack on us, that there can be an element of like getting back into control again, because the moment you go and attack someone else, there's an element of like feeling your power back again. But again, that's a short-term substitute for covering up of shame and making yourself like kind of feel better in the moment, but then there's ramifications afterwards. And so when we have someone who's maybe going through anger and resentment, maybe you notice that there's some like deflection, or they need to have a sense of control. Often we're working on that issue of what's presenting to us, but we're not actually looking at, if we looked at this from the shame matrix, we'd be going, oh, hang on, what's the shame underneath all of that that's driving this behavior in the first place? Like, let's just do like, does it not blow your mind, team? It's like, what is actually truly going on? Let's get to the problem underneath the problem. Let's get to the core dynamic that's actually driving the attacking, anger, aggression, blame in the first place. Instead of just working on the surface issue, we really, in the shame matrix, get to something deeper, so we can have a look at what's really underneath the surface, so we can work on that particular issue. And shame will come up. Maybe it's shame from something someone said. It can be shame from a financial situation. It can be shame for not delivering what was promised. It can be shame for so many different reasons. Shame will show up in every 7 area of life. And so we want to maybe consider and do a deeper dive into the things that we perceive shame about in our own life, especially if you want to share more on social media, if you want to put yourself out there, if you're a beginning coach and wanting to start and share your work more with people, or sell packages to people. It's like, what's the shame that's holding yourself back, that you're maybe in withdrawal? What are you avoiding? What's the shame there? If you're in that attacking mode, what's happening underneath that? If you're self-attacking, lots of criticism internally, like how can't you do further ahead than where you should be? Why did X, Y, Z? Then maybe you can look at the shame matrix, the shame dynamic, to clear that. So thank you so much, team. I hope you have loved this session. I'm just incredibly grateful. I just want to do a big grateful to someone in our community, and you might know this particular individual, and it is Justin Wiseman. I just want to do a massive heartfelt thank you to him, because the fact that you get this like matrix idea and getting to have a deeper look into human behavior. So when you have a challenge that comes up, you can now think about, hang on, there's a shame matrix. How does that all fit into everything? I know I wouldn't be able to do that and create that if it wasn't for Justin being on board with Maximum Growth and just having headspace now to be able to put human behavior into some simple, simple ideas for you to then to be able to understand it at a deeper level, to be able to then take it out to your clients, use it on yourself. So I'm doing a deep gratitude to that man. Incredible. Love you dearly. Thank you so much, team. I hope you have an incredible day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to seeing you at the next perfect time.